Before Israel became a state, what was life like for the Jewish pioneers who helped to build it? This is Aliyah News. Located in the historic town of Zichron Yaakov, the First Aliyah Museum tells the remarkable story of the first modern Jewish immigrants who returned to the land of Israel between 1882 and 1904. Ephraim Cohen takes us through the museum and brings to life the journeys of these pioneering men and women, the challenges they faced, the communities they built, and the foundations that they laid for the modern-day state of Israel.
Welcome to the Museum of the First Aliyah in Zichron Yaakov. It commemorates the period from 1882 until 1902, a period during which several thousand Jews from Eastern Europe came to what was then Palestine and began building what later became the nation state of the Jewish people, which is now Israel. This is the building that is now the Museum of the First Aliyah. Originally it was built by Baron Rothschild, who was from France and a major contributor to the beginning of the nation state of the Jewish people, which became Israel.
So what instigated the first Aliyah, which took place in the 1880s?
First of all, you've heard the term pogrom, which was basically people, especially soldiers from the countries where they were living, attacking Jews. It was not a safe place to be. The second thing, especially in Russia passed new laws in the early 1880s that prohibited Jews from making a living. You couldn't practice your profession. Also, from the early 1800s until the late 1800s, the population of Jews in Eastern Europe went up from about 3 million to about 10 million. So there's this huge population explosion at the same time that you're not allowed to support them. So there's this push for people to leave the country, to leave those countries. So some of the people came here, because the pull here was the holiness of the land, the religious dedication to a Jewish homeland, for 30,000 people or so. But other people went to the United States for the same reasons, though, because they just couldn't live as Jews safely in the countries that they were coming from. The reason it's called an aliyah is that we believe that when you came to Palestine, when you came to what was the Holy Land, you were going up in holiness. And when you went to Jerusalem, you went up even higher in holiness. And there's a reverse word that is yerida, which means to go down. So when you leave Israel, it's as if you're going down in holiness. And there are some very, very religious people who believe that once you're here, you're not allowed to leave because you're turning your back on the holiness. This is a map of Eastern Europe, the way it was during this period that we're talking about. And the reason, well, a lot of people came from up here. These towns no longer exist, obviously, but they came down through Odessa. Odessa was the center of people coming to Palestine. The reason for that is that it's right on the sea. People would come down here and they'd put all of their belongings and wagons and that type of thing on ships. And the ship would sail through what was then Constantinople, came through Istanbul, into the Mediterranean, and then they came to Jaffa, and they got off the boat on Jaffa. But about 30,000 people during the first Aliyah came this route and came into what was then Palestine. Most people who came, what they knew about this land was a land flowing with milk and honey. They didn't know how tough it was going to be once they got here. So let's talk about the things that they found. There were swamps with water buffalo. Because of the swamps, there was a tremendous problem with malaria. This is what Caesarea used to look like, just sand. Except during the rainy season, and then instead of sand, it was all mud. And these are the fertile fields that they thought they were coming to. It wasn't really very fertile. So they came to build the country, but they didn't really know what they were getting themselves into. These are the first towns in Palestine of the Aliyah. Here's one that's called Rishon LeZion, which means the first of Zion. They get the award. They were the first. That were the first town. Here's Zichron Yaakov, right along the coast here. All the others, pretty much all of these still exist. You know, all the towns that we saw on the map, they didn't seize the land. They're not here as conquerors. They bought land, either from the owners or because it was unused land. Also, there were Jews living in this area historically. There were Jews, there's a constant Jewish history in Palestine from the time of the Second Temple. Yes, most of the people were taken out and sent to Rome, but there was still a Jewish community. I met with a woman who lives in northern Israel. She traces her family all the way back to the Second Temple. Her family has been in Israel since then. Just to talk a little bit about Baron Rothschild. The Baron didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to support the Jewish homeland. What he did was he was doing this sort of as a hobby. He was donating a lot of money, and he was experimenting. He would support tobacco or poppies for medicinal opium. But eventually he figured out to do things that were indigenous. So grapes and olives, wine, olive oil, things like that, things that really worked. This represents what really saved the Zichron and Rishon LeZion was the manufacture of wine. Until then they were struggling, but we had people who knew how to sell things. We had some people who were carpenters who could make barrels. And Baron Rothschild, he made wine back in Paris. So he knew how to make wine, and they knew how to sell wine. So it's a fabulous merging of effort. And besides that, they had a captive audience because they had Jewish families all around the world that would love to have a bottle of wine from the Holy Land on their table for the Sabbath. All the other Zionist organizations in what was then Palestine, or for Palestine, donated approximately 15 million franc. Baron Rothschild himself donated over 60 million franc. So we're talking about he contributed more than 4 times as much as all the other Zionist organizations. Okay, now I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about Ben Yehuda, Eliezer Ben Yehuda. Everybody knows that name. He is the father of modern Hebrew. He actually came from Russia, early 1880s, and he developed the first modern Hebrew dictionary. The way he grew the language was he bought a newspaper, and every week when the newspaper came out, at the top of the newspaper was 2 or 3 new Hebrew words, and people would buy the newspaper to learn these words. One of the universities, a new university, wanted him to support the university, and he said, okay, I will, but only if the teachers teach in Hebrew. And they said, well, they can't speak Hebrew because they come from Europe. He said, okay, I'll teach them how to speak Hebrew. They stayed with him, and that was the beginning of what is now the concept of ulpan. Ulpan is how you teach people Hebrew by immersing them. They live it 24 hours a day, and they speak only Hebrew from the very beginning. And that was really one of his creations. So now I want to finish by talking about Hatikvah. The middle of the end starts Olah av Hatikvatenu. We have not yet lost our hope. Now that comes from Ezekiel, because there's the story about the dry bones, you know, and God says to Ezekiel, I see the bones, and the bones say to me, we have lost our hope. That was 2,000 years ago. We have lost our hope. And Naftali Hertz-Inber is saying not so fast. We haven't lost our hope. Olah av Hatikvatenu, Hatikvah bat shnot alpayim. The hope is 2,000 years old. It's 2,000 years old. It didn't start with the British Mandate. Didn't start with the War of Independence in 48, or the Six-Day War in 67, or the whatever. It's 2,000 years old that Jews have been hoping to come back here. Hatikvah bat shnot alpayim, liot am chavshi be'artzenu, to be a free people in our land. as wonderful as our sort of stops along the way may have been. For a long time, Poland was great for the Jews until the Second World War. The United States has been great for the Jews, but I'm not sure how long it's going to last. Australia has been great for the Jews until some of them got killed. You never know. So, liot am chavshi b'artzenu, to be a free people in our land. Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. Now that little v that I said, Eretz Zion, the land of Zion, v'Yerushalayim, it means and Jerusalem. That's a very important letter, because people sometimes say the land of Zion, Jerusalem, as if only Jerusalem is important. And as long as we've got that, that's all the land of Zion. But when you say the land of Zion and Jerusalem, it means it's the land, the biblical land of Zion, and Jerusalem as its capital. So, olah Hatikvatenu, Hatikvah bat shnot alpayim liot am chavshi, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Okay, so that's my story.
Imagine arriving in a land of swamps, malaria, limited infrastructure, and a language that is still being revived. Yet the pioneers of the First Aliyah persevered. They built communities, cultivated the land, and laid the foundations of the modern state. Since then, generations of new immigrants have continued to build upon their remarkable legacy. As we look at the thriving nation Israel has become, it's hard not to think of the words of the prophet Ezekiel. But you, mountains of Israel, shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people Israel. The land that was desolate shall be tilled. How remarkable to think that land once plagued by swamps and malaria is now producing crops, innovation, and an abundance that reaches countries all around the world. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the Ebenezer Operation Exodus YouTube channel and hit the notification bell. See you next time.